We're going to talk to you about the call for expressions of interest. We will describe the process, how it works, and then we will be here to listen to answer any questions you may have. Thank you very much. And I think your microphones are off during the presentation. And during the presentation, then we will activate your microphones. There you go. Thank you very much. Could we move to the next slide, please? One moment, please. Can you see the screen? Yeah. Yes. So, okay, first of all, I'm going to describe the initiative briefly. So it was implemented by Expertise France at the end of 2011, which is in addition to the Global Fund to fight AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria. So this initiative is to provide technical support and financial support to Global Fund recipient countries and to improve this. There are 40 of them to improve the effectiveness of the grants and enhance the impact of programs to fight against the pandemic and also strengthen health systems. As we said, there are 40 eligible countries. We are truly working in strong partnership with the Global Fund, and we have several types of partners: scientific research, medical research, civil society, public agencies, etc. So we have all sorts of organizations who are working in the context of the fight against AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria. To give you a bit of an idea, our annual budget, a 3-year budget, is $319 million for the current cycle, 23-25, which is 20% of France's contribution to the Global Fund. This initiative is governed by a multidisciplinary steering committee chaired by the French Ministry of Europe and Foreign Affairs. And there are several representatives, civil society, AFD, the French Ministry of Health and Prevention, the research community, as well as permanent guests from the Global Fund Secretariat as observers. This is the decisions on projects to select are taken by this steering committee. There are 3 types of operation. There is technical assistance. That is truly the partners' request in the different countries. It can be health ministers, civil society, and the aim is to support those countries and to better implement Global Fund grants and fight against the pandemic. Then we have a project channel which operates as the form of a call for projects once a year. Currently, it is open. And there are 3 channels, one on strengthening health systems, one on vulnerable populations, and one on operational research. Also, please go and view this because these are currently open until the end of January. And then we have also created the accelerator, l'accélérateur, in the current cycle to answer the challenges that we were not able to respond to through technical support or project responses. This provides certain information which we cannot necessarily place properly. So this is a call for a response to malaria. We can see that those countries, the countries suffering from malaria do not often answer. So we now have created calls of interest to enable this to be more in line with the topics of the initiative. So there you go. As I was saying, I'm not going to talk too much about l'accélérateur. That's what we work around through this table. We have 2 different ways to work. A key priority is on human resources for health, which is 50% of our portfolio. And we really work alongside countries' health ministries to support their reforms and their policies to strengthen health care. And the second part is on the challenges which are neglected in line with our partners to develop calls for expressions of interest based on malaria, also with civil society, different types of interventions through this neglected challenges sector, which today is focusing on the response to malaria. There you go. So why this? So all of the indicators for malaria and also related to what we have financed to date, financed through the partners to try to better cover this malaria aspect. Indeed, today we can see that despite all the challenges in the last 20 years, all of the efforts to fight against malaria, there are still many challenges. We can see that this fight is slowing down, and there is a risk indeed of it going backwards. So we would truly like to support this on malaria and community health because I want to focus on that because community health is an essential role in the fight against malaria in Africa. So we really want to work on these aspects to strengthen the promotion of health prevention and the role and to diagnose and care, as well as raising awareness on malaria, also with the potentially role which can be played by community organizations with changes of behavior, the anti-vector and the climate, which are key challenges in the fight against malaria for the moment. So now I'm going to leave Pablo to present this in more detail. Thank you very much. Over to you, Pablo. Hello, everybody. I will continue the presentation on the call for expressions of interest that we launched a few weeks ago. So the general aim is to improve the response to malaria by strengthening, promoting, and amplifying community health approaches in the fight against malaria. But the focus is on community health, everything to do with monitoring, prevention, diagnosis, and care. Note that the projects need to have an approach to malaria and primary health, focusing on central role played by community health workers and community monitoring, CLM in English, community-led monitoring. So the idea is to have an integrated approach on malaria, which will focus and treat the entire range integrated with community health as their key focus. So this graph here shows you the organizations working on malaria response and organizations working on primary health care. So you can work in partnership with several partners, specialists in malaria and community health, for example, agents. There is also the gender sensitive approach we will speak about a bit later. So the topics, the themes, as I was saying, these projects must work on everything to do with promotion, prevention and health promotion, screening, diagnosis and treatment, and the projects must include the following cross-cutting themes. The gender-sensitive approach, you need to differentiate all the data aggregated by sex, and if possible, in the diagnosis of the project, analyze separately gender to understand effectively the differences, how this malaria, how this disease impacts men and women differently, and other vulnerabilities that we may identify it as important to target this to adapt the project's response. And as we said, everything also related to community monitoring and surveillance, strengthening the skills of community health workers, strengthening data collection and analysis. It is very important to better adapt the project response later. There is also cooperation between civil society organizations, primary health structures, local authorities, and national programs. It is important to involve all actors in the country in the fight against malaria, not forgetting all actors so that the approach is fully integrated. That could be one of the recommendations. If you have not yet integrated all the actors in the country, it would be one of the recommendations that we will make to you during the project. Also, interventions targeting peripheral areas, which are particularly hard hit, to submit for this call for projects. I will continue with target populations for this project, the general population in the affected areas, with particular attention being paid to the key malaria populations. So, who are those people? They are refugees and internally displaced people, migrants, pregnant women, children under 5, indigenous populations from highly endemic areas, and people who are geographically distant from healthcare facilities. These are the key populations targeted by this call for expressions of interest. I will continue with the eligible countries of implementation for this call. These countries selected for this are Burundi, Guinea, Liberia, Sierra Leone, Central African Republic, and Democratic Republic of Congo. We had to carry out an analysis of the different indicators linked to malaria to select for our final selection. There are lots of countries, but the budget is limited, and we just have $8 million, as we will see later. So we had to select and eliminate other countries which also have strong indicators on malaria. So the project submitted may be implemented in one or more of the countries in this list, but for multi-country projects, they will be only accepted if they are part of a clearly justified regional dynamic. So explaining this for border countries, for example, that is an option to justify the choice of to have multiple countries, but you need to explain the regional dynamic if we choose more than one country. So amounts and duration, as I said, we have got 8 million euros available. The total grant requested must be between 500,000 and 2 million per project. 2 million euros maximum. The initiative may finance the entire project budget. However, co-financing of at least 10% of the total budget is strongly recommended. We can finance everything if you manage to have co-financing that will be taken into account in the final project selection. And for co-financing, this can be in the form of a valorization, in other words, human resources or any other type of work which could be called upon during the project. That can be valorized and could be considered as co-financing for the project. The implementation period should be between 24 and 48 months. So between 2 and 4 years maximum for the project. Partnerships. Here, we will explain to you what is the jargon within this initiative. The organization signing the contract, we call them the sponsor. So they must have a key sponsor who will receive the grant and they will sign the contract with you, so a project leader. And then there must be one or more implementing partners who will have a budget delegation from the sponsor. That is important to take into account. You need to have at least one implementation partner who will receive a delegation. And then it is also important to have what we call stakeholders. These are organizations who will not have budget delegations, as I said in the presentation. It's important to work with all the actors in the country on this matter, on malaria, who must be part of the project. And if they do not have any budget delegation, they will be stakeholders who can then provide a service in a specific sector. But it's important too to include all of the organizations within the country. So the sponsor and its partners may be healthcare structures, civil society organizations, ministries, and associated programs, research institutes, universities, or any other organization who meets the eligibility criteria. There you are. Lots of organizations are eligible for this call, except for international organizations such as the United Nations, who are not eligible, and any other eligible structure to this call for expressions of interest. And what are the criteria for eligibility? The main carrier, the project leader, must meet the following criteria. So they are the one who is going to submit the project and must meet these criteria. They must be registered as a legal entity with a board of directors or a management committee and a registered office in a country eligible for the initiative or in France. We will see that in a slide later with a map. And they must have a head office in France or in one of the 38 eligible countries. That is important. The second criterion is the legal existence for at least 3 years at the time of filing. And thirdly, they must have sufficient management capacity to manage the project's annual budget. These are the criteria that we will explain to you with the management capabilities that you have for the main project leader. So here you have in the call that you've received, you have a list of all of the eligible countries for the initiatives. There are 38 of them. So with their head office and be registered within one of these countries or France, all the countries you can see on the map. What else? Antennas, representations, and local offices of an organization which is based in another country which is not in this list here, for example, the United Kingdom, Switzerland, or the United States, are not eligible as a carrier, a main sponsor. And the project's activities must take place in the country or countries already mentioned. So there you go. The head office needs to be in one of these countries, and the implementation must take place in one of these countries already mentioned. I will continue. So one of these three criteria, so that means legal representation for at least 3 years in one of the above mentioned eligible countries, verified on the basis of the organization's declaration to the authorities of the country concerned. For ministries and other public programs, it is possible to submit the creation decree. And we will repeat it to you at the end. If you have any questions or any doubts on the eligibility criteria, you can ask us questions today or later. You can send us your questions by writing to these email addresses that you can see on the slide. In terms of financial capacity criteria for the main sponsor must have sufficient management skills to manage the project budget. We have put a formula here. In other words, the average annual budget for the organization may not exceed 70% of the project's total annual expenditure for 2023. So to calculate this, you can see the formula, the minimum annual expenditure of 2023 of the sponsor. We've multiplied by the total value of the project and divided by the duration of the project in years. This is multiplied by 0.70, divided by 0.70. So, for example, if a project is 500,000 euros over 4 years, the annual average is 125,000. This annual average must represent a maximum of 70% of the sponsor's annual budget, i.e., 178,571 euros. There you go. So if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to get in touch. And Adeline, I will now leave you to explain this slide. Thank you very much. Just for information, I can see lots of questions on this point. The session is recorded in French and in English and will be available along with all of the questions asked on our website. So in a few days, you will have access to all of these questions with our contact details if you wish to ask us specific questions by email. Clearly, there will be a pause over Christmas, but in the first week of January, we will get back to you. On that, like that, everybody will have the right information. So this slide is just here to show it's the same thing as the previous slide, the different way of calculating this. So it is for you to be able to calculate the maximum amount that you can request through this call for expressions of interest. So clearly the maximum value depends on your annual expenditure in 2023. In other words, the expenditure you reported last year. So to understand the maximum budget that you can request, you need to do 0.70 times the annual expenditure in euros times the project duration in years. For example, if you have deferred 200,000 of annual expenditure in 2023 and the project is over 4 years, you can therefore request 200,000 times 4 times 0.70 equals 560. That means also the challenge is that if this calculation gives you a sum beneath lower than the minimum value requested that we ask you to request, you are not eligible. This rule, in fact, is quite simple and it enables you to check that you have the capability to manage the funds requested and that you are not asking for too much related to your management capabilities. So, indeed, if you have posted 170,000 of expenditure in 2023. Applying this rule, you reach a figure of 476,000 euros. So you're below 500,000. So you are not eligible, but you could be a partner with another sponsor. This is an important rule, and we will come back to this later. I don't know, Pablo, if you wish to take this back or if we should continue. I will continue. So, how the call works. So we are almost going to finalize this bit. So it is in two phases with a letter of intent and the complete project. In phase one is the submission, appraisal and pre-selection of letters of intent from November 2024 to January 2025. And the pre-selected projects will move to phase two, where we will ask them to submit a complete project from March 2024. What is specific about this call for expressions of interest compared to other sponsors is that with this accelerator methodology, during phase one, the sponsor can ask for support for the project. What you can see here, they can suggest for support for the pre-selected sponsor for phase two. In other words, the candidates must tell us of this desire for support to be supported, and we will provide technical support to help those organizations that ask for it in the writing of a full project. So that will not be mandatory and can be in different forms depending on the needs identified, and this will be negotiated between the sponsor and the initiative. This is important, this specific characteristic for this call. The provisional calendar, as we said, the call for expressions of interest was begun on the 30th of October 2024. The call for expressions of interest closes on the 13th of January at midnight. Decision on pre-selection of organizations will be at the end of February 2025. The complete project development will be during spring 2025, and selection of complete projects, we haven't yet got the dates, but that will be June before summer 2025, June, July. So the documents to be submitted before the closure on the 13th of January are in English or in French. This is the concept note, Appendix 1, plus the administrative form, which is Appendix 2. So documents to be submitted. Also, we have a copy of the main spotter's Articles of Association. And if it's in a language other than French or English, a simple translation will be required. We will ask you also to provide proof of registration of the main supporting organization. So these are always the documents for the main supporting organization, not necessarily other implementation partners. And that must contain their registered address. If in a language other than French or English, a simple translation will be required, or an affidavit if that is not available in your country. We will ask you, for example, for proof that the main sponsor has met its social and tax obligations in the country of registration. For example, in France, an URSSAF certificate, and other equivalent examples which you will find in each of your countries. We will ask you for your latest full financial report with an income statement and a balance sheet from the main sponsor organization, which has been validated by the annual general meeting or any other governing body. The projected budget for 2024 and 2025, the latest annual activity report from the main sponsor, and the latest validated audit report from the main sponsor, if that is available. So we've put this, the last audit report signed by the AGM, and if that is not available, we will ask you for the latest validated report by your governance bodies. And there you go. If you have any doubts, please do not hesitate to get in touch to share your questions and doubts with us. We will be able to answer them as soon as today. And I think this is the last. This is important. How to submit this call for expressions of interest. We cannot use the usual arrangement for the annual call for the initiative. We have therefore put in place another parallel system where you need to share this by email in a PDF format before the 13th January by using these different email addresses. Use the first email address first and the others in copy. And this is important. If the attachments are more than 10 megabytes, you will need to send them in several emails. That's important because otherwise you will get an email stating that it was not possible to send your email. So you will receive a confirmation email. If you do not get that, please write to us again using the same email address. That is important to avoid problems of non-delivery. Please ensure that you do not exceed 10 megabytes, and please ensure that you have received an confirmation email, which is sent to all submissions. There you go. Once again, the email addresses. And with this slide, we have finished. So we can now move to the next phase, which is your questions. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you, Pablo. I can see that there is already a hand raised before. I'm just going to summarize the questions in the chat and in the Q&A section so that everybody has the same information. You do have access to this in theory, but I prefer to summarize. So I repeat that the recording and the slides presented will be available in a few days on the AFD site, on our website. I've put that in the chat. That way you will get all of the points. And then in addition to complementarity of activities from the Global Fund, the question is whether this can be complementary or will that not be taken into account by the Global Fund to clearly complementary with the Global Fund is quite simple. It just involves checking that we are not financing things which are already financed by submissions from the Global Fund. In other words, inputs, for example, uh, mosquito insect-related nets, and then that is complementary to what is already financed by the Global Fund. And there's another question that's just been asked on the same thing. It is not necessary to be in areas not covered by the Global Fund. You can be, but you can also propose operations where activities are already financed, in part at least, by the Global Fund. And unless I am wrong, if I've correctly understood, it is not the case. In terms of the dynamic, the regional dynamics, can a collaboration within a network be valid for countries which are not covered? Yes, why not? We truly encourage you to justify the added value of a particular country, particularly in terms of need of health needs, but not necessarily. Multiple country projects will not be favored over single country projects. That is not necessarily a specific criterion. We need to have it justified. For example, in countries with bordering countries, other countries, that is clear, but it is more complex. You need to demonstrate that the needs are very similar and there is a true added value to operate in two countries. That was for the questions in the Q&A. On the other questions, if I can find them again in the chat. I have put the link towards our website. There is a question in English to understand whether organizations receiving funds from the Global Fund currently can submit. Yes, the key sponsor and recipients are totally eligible as long as they respect the eligibility criteria that we have already presented. On the number of candidacies per organization, can we submit as a sponsor for all of these? There is a confusion here in the chat. For example, in writing two, there's just one call for expressions of interest, but we have several other projects across the initiative, across the rest of the initiative, which are available. But this is another process, another channel of finance. In part of this specific call for expressions of interest, there is no limits to the number of candidacies, and indeed we encourage you not to multiply your candidacies. That does not guarantee that you will be selected more. You need to then subsequently be able to have as many ideas as projects. So I encourage you not to multiply your candidacies, your submissions. In terms of the documents to submit, all of the documents to be submitted are available in the regulations for the call for expressions of interest. So you can find that on our website if you have picked up on this. There are other questions in the chat. There is a question. If there is a local submission in Sierra Leone, which has a head office in Sierra Leone, can they submit? Yes, totally. You're completely eligible. And I would like to take this opportunity also to specify that. But on the other hand, if your head office is in a country, in one of the 38 countries of the initiative, or in France, you will need to have a partner in the country of operation. For example, if you're an organization in Senegal who wants to work on a project in Sierra Leone, you will need a partner in Sierra Leone. And if you are an organization in Sierra Leone, of course, you can submit with partners locally or outside the country, but you can indeed submit your candidacy as well. In terms of the limits per organization, as I say, there is no limit. There is just one call for expressions of interest. I would like to repeat that. You need to make a difference between this one on malaria and other calls for expressions of interest, which don't have the same dates or the same processes. There you go. I'm going to enter the answers in writing. Can we now hand over to the person who raised their hand? Estimate good for. Hello. Yes, go ahead. Thank you. Pablo said somewhere that there were the documents to be submitted. It was Appendix 1 and Appendix 2, which was the concept note and the administrative forms. I would like to speak about this when we go into the documents on 2 points, which could be quite complicated, but also I can see another appendix in Excel, which talks about the candidate capabilities. Is that amongst the documents that need to be submitted, or would we just submit the 2 documents cited by Pablo? Thank you. Thank you very much for your question. Indeed, there are just 2 documents. There was a problem in a document where we spoke about Appendix 3, but you just need to submit the 2 documents which are attached to the call for expressions of interest. I hope that is clear. So the other document for info, the partner capability analysis, is an internal document that we will use to analyze your capabilities. But it's just the documents that you find that you can download from our website. These are the only ones that you need to submit for the first phase, the concept note. And it is just the organizations who are selected following this who we will talk with later in March to ask them for a full project with other documents which we will share with them, but just to those pre-selected organizations. Thank you very much. Questions in the Q&A. So should partners be only from health sector or from others? And that depends on your project. We could have a project with partners who do not operate directly in health. So if you want to justify the creation of the project, if it is seeking to fight against malaria, in that area, there are many possibilities. A good example, for example, schools. You need to go to schools. You need to have a partner specialized in education matters. No problem. It will be the same answer for many of these questions. It's all about justifying them. And I think that the second question we've just answered. Somebody's raised their hand. So the other questions in the chat. Can an organization operate in 2 countries? Yes, obviously. Can they propose to apply for 2 countries? Yes, either for 1 country or for 2 projects, no problem. Is it possible to have a European institution as a partner? And which considerations in terms of budgets and responsibilities should be taken into account? For European organization, no. But international organizations such as the UN or international organizations are not available as implementation partners. But on the other hand, they can be co-financers. That is possible. We are then asked if we can submit the concept note on several themes, or should we submit only one note dealing with one theme or all at once? That depends on your project. some are not relevant. And if you think that you need to repeat several topics, as long as it's linked to malaria, obviously, because that is the criterion for the project, we encourage you in that case to do that in a single project. But if you think that you should do it over 2 or 3 different approaches, can we hand over to Rachel and Daya? Over to you, Rachel. Thank you. Hello, everybody. Thank you for your presentation. I had a concern. This is Rachel Daya from DRC. And my concern is on the number of organizations who can be part of a consortium. Is there a limit? Because at the country level, we think that we could create a consortium with civil society organizations to submit our candidacy. Thank you. Thank you very much. Pleased to see you here. No, there are no limits in the partnerships. If you want to work in the partnership with other organizations, civil society organizations, we need an organization, sponsor organization, and then management can be delegated to other organizations, no problem. But you need to have a single sponsor. On the other hand, please take care. These are a project of a maximum of 2 million euros. So you also need it to be manageable in terms of delegation management in your countries, of course, but it can be relevant too. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And sorry, just to add a comment, as I said a few minutes ago, that you must not fill in the candidate capability form, but yes, you need to fill it in because we put it on the website. These documents need to be filled in too. So the documents that you would be provided for information, there is an analysis grid. The analysis grid is to inform you of the criteria that we will follow internally to evaluate each concept note. So this is not to be completed. It is to enable you to see how you will be evaluated. So complete the concept note. The concept note will not just be more than a certain number of pages. You can go and have a look in the analysis grid to see if you have answered everything properly, because that is what we are going to evaluate later. The people who will evaluate internally and externally will look at this, will score this for transparency. We will communicate all the criteria we will use to evaluate this concept note. So this grid not to be filled in. The other documents that you will download will need to be completed and sent to us. In fact, there are some projects where they can help you, but the documents, project documents, the concept note, the administrative form are the basis of what you need to supply to us so we can evaluate it. Then there are all the documents, administrative documents, the attachments which justify your eligibility and demonstrate your ability to manage what you are asking for. That is why it's a bit lost there, but there are the 2 main documents, the concept notes and the administrative form, and then in the appendices, you must also complete and fill in documents. Please read carefully. Please read the rules carefully. Just take a question before handing over to the person who has raised their hand. Can an organization work in a consortium with a sponsor and cover different subtopics? Yes, you can be a sponsor of one project and a partner in another for this call for expressions of interest. And then on terms of partners who are not specialized in health, for example, agriculture, is difficult to answer without reading the project, but yes, why not? As long as it can be justified in line with the health needs linked to malaria. No problem there. Indeed, I repeat again, Annex 3, which is mentioned in the rules, does not exist. That was an error by us. There is just Appendix 1 and 2. I'm sorry for this mistake. I will answer all of the questions in writing in the Q&A and also in the chat where possible. So, I am asked if this initiative can recommend a community organization. In fact, the sponsor must meet all of the criteria we have set out. That is something which we are not flexible on, but the partners, sorry, do not have any eligibility rules. So that is something, if you're not eligible as a sponsor, you can work in a consortium with an organization that is to be able to answer. Next, for selection of the call for expression of address, you spoke about two phases. For the first phase, we just state an intention. Yes, so you have the concept note and the data to the administrative form to be submitted, in addition to the appendices we have just mentioned. And in the second phase, if you are selected, there will be other documents that we will share with you. Again, once again, do not confuse this call for expressions of interest with other projects. They are completely different. This call is on malaria and other projects are on other matters, but you can submit for pediatrics and malaria. We're asking if a partner in a non-eligible country can sponsor a project. No, if you are not eligible, if you are not in an eligible country or in France, you are not eligible as a sponsor. You are as a partner up to 5% of the budget delegation. But in terms of the partner selection, there are different questions. The first is to know if the sponsor can manage the funds to the level required. So you have a form for that. Then, in terms of partners, what we will examine is the logic, the expertise, and the added value brought by this partner. If you are a French organization, Senegal organization, and you want to do a project in Sierra Leone, and you do not have any partners in Sierra Leone, that could be a problem. It is also a question of logic. There was a raised hand. I cannot see it anymore. There's a question in the chat. So the question, I don't know if it's the same question in the chat, but we'll hand over to you. Monsieur, we have a colleague, a female called Ange, but I'm calling from DRC. In fact, it's the same question that I put in the chat, but I think there's a determined number of pages for the administrative form, and every time you need to enter not just the sponsor organization, but also for the other partners. Could we not exceed the number of pages required? There you are. That's it. If you have 4, you need to fill in the 4. If you're 5, you need to fill in the 5. So we will go over the 5 pages provided. Thank you. Yes, on the partnership section, yes, indeed. What we want, if is that the partners need to fill is what we want to do is to create inequality. We do not want some people who develop the project logic over 20 pages and others using 4 pages, because clearly it would be unfair for those who have done 4 pages. So this first note is to present your project idea and see if we will advance or not. So in the project description, you need to respect the number of pages we have told you. But if you have several partners, fill in the number of partners. But the project logic, you need to follow the number of pages. Otherwise, we will not study the page if you submit 20 pages, because that is not fair for the others. There will be a second phase if you are selected, where you will have the opportunity to describe the full project with everything with more room to go into detail. But 4 pages, we can truly understand project ideas and evaluate those. And in addition, in Appendix 2, administrative forms, there is no page limit. There is no page limit there. We just said that for the concept note in the project description, we said 5 pages, but not in the other, so no worries there. There's a question. We ask you not to share their contact details for legal reasons, but if you want to share, I'm sorry, I repeat, we cannot communicate participant contact details. On the other hand, we can. You are free to share your contact details in the chat if you wish to. We are also asked if we are going to translate this live. I hope that our interpreter will not hate me for this. Can we use an integrated approach using climate sensitive actions? The answer is yes. You can justify this on malaria. We've spoken about it a bit. We can act on climate matters. I can't tell you much more than that. Can a partnership, is a partnership possible with a university, an academic organization, or a government entity? Yes, absolutely. There are no limits on the statutes of the sponsors or the partners. There can be any type of structure in as much as there is a legal existence. They exist legally, so they are registered in one of the eligible countries. For calculating financial capabilities, 2 organizations forming a consortium, can they add up their budgets to 2023 and calculate the amount to be put into this call? No, there is just one sponsor who must answer these criteria. And sorry, several partners who then will have a budget delegation. So you cannot have 2 sponsors who will submit a single budget. That is possible. So if you are selected, we will just sign a contract with a single organization, and it will be this organization responsibility in full for the implementation of the project. So the way you organize with your partners, first of all, to see if the project is feasible, but we don't look at the links that you have directly. So yes, just a single sponsor. Interpreter apologizes. Sound was not clear there. Yes. Where is the question? There is an attachment to fill in the concept note, which is copied onto the website. I think that we have the link. We can submit it again now, I think. And just use that format. Other formats will not be studied. This format must be followed. This is to be fair between you. And I repeat, this phase is in 2 phases. First of all, to present your idea, and then if you are selected, you will develop a full project. I see there are people sharing their contact details in the chat. Somebody who has shared their contact details in the Q&A. If you have an access I think you should rather put your message in the chat so that everybody can see. I think that's already been done. That's good. Perfect. Thank you. I do not have any other questions, either in the chat or in the Q&A. Please do not hesitate to take the floor as well in the same way. If you have specific questions for your organization, it's not necessarily the best place to ask them here questions about the budget, but please don't hesitate to get in touch. We will share the slides. So please do not hesitate. I have another question. I'm pleased to get questions. Is it mandatory to apply only with a previous recipient of the call, or can an institution apply? No, this call is the first time we've done this where you do not need to apply with organizations. I know that this is the case for sometimes. You can apply if you have not have any financial from the initiative before. We would even encourage you to participate if you have not had finance from us before. It is not. It's neutral for us in terms of our assessment. We do not favor those who have already had funds from us. So there are several deadlines. No, in fact, there's just one deadline. I think you're getting confused with the call for projects. There is just one date, which is the 13th of January, midday French time. So you're getting confused with the call for projects, the other calls for projects by the initiative. Here we are really talking about the call for expressions of interest on malaria, and the deadline is the 13th of January. Are there other questions? So yes, technical support for the project is something which we will discuss with you depending on the capabilities of the sponsors, and it is up to us who will cover this. It is not covered by the sponsor. L'initiative will pay for this technical support and deploy it. We will not support all organizations in the same way. If you're a large French organization, you will not have the support a smaller organization locally in a country would get. That can appear clear, but I confirm that this will be in line with your needs, but also with the project development. Also, perhaps it could be a technical support. For example, if you want to submit something on a topic when you want to conclude something that you do not quite cover, we could find a technical expert who could help you support this area. For example, if you want to work on an innovative project, that could be something we could do then. But this expert will just support, will not develop a project that you have not already considered. The idea is that ideas come from the sponsor. Are there any questions? There are no other questions in the chat. No more hands raised. We still have a bit of time, so please do not hesitate. There are no stupid questions where otherwise you have got our email addresses. If you have additional questions later, please, you can write to us. And we will answer in writing as and when as well in order to publish them on our website. We will publish the answers to all of the questions asked. And also for the previous session, even if in many cases the questions are the same. Pascal Cezongi's hand is raised. Go ahead. Hello, madame. I'm calling from DRC. I'm Pascal Tezangui from Expertise Congolaise pour la proposition et contrôle des affections. I would like to understand if your initiative will support in the fight against malaria and the call for expressions of interest in the first, it will be the first intervention, or whether you will do this every year. Thank you for your question. This call for expressions of interest is a first for us, and for now, we do not know if we will do it in subsequent years. For now, we are launching this as a pilot initiative, but we could repeat the experience, but I cannot answer this. I do not know if we will do it again next year. So we can't commit to that. We have finance per cycle, and our cycle finishes 2025. So we will see what we will repeat. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you to you. There was another hand raised, but I cannot see it anymore. Please don't hesitate to ask your questions in writing. Yes, Didier. Can we grant Didier the floor? Didier, you can speak if you wish. Otherwise, that's not a problem. You can also write your question. Yes, hello. Hello. Okay, my question is my first. So, our question was to understand if we have the opportunity to discuss with your team on matters which could arise, to have discussions to enable candidates to fully understand the question. Yes, you can speak with other candidates. Yes, yes, with us. Yes. Sorry. We have put our email addresses. So please don't hesitate to write to us by email. If you have specific questions, we will answer those more directly. Thank you. Thank you to you. Estimé Godefroy, we will hand over to you. Go ahead. Yes, hello again. Coming back to the appendices to be attached. I am estimé Kinshasa. I would like to question about the letters of engagement. In Appendix 1 of the concept note, there is the letter of engagement, and it says for each partner organization in project implementation. I find it difficult to understand if you are in a consortium, each partner in the consortium will also be required to submit a letter of engagement. Interpreter apologizes. The sound cut at the end of that question. Thank you for your question. In fact, you're talking about an element which is mentioned in the document. The letter of engagement is simply a letter whose content is free, but enables you to ensure that your partners are supporting this project. It is not mandatory, but it is better to submit that. It is a very simple single page letter where each partner confirms that they are fully committed to this project and they have been consulted and support the project. Once again, it is not a mandatory appendix. If you do not submit it, you won't necessarily be penalized, but it involves demonstrating that you've been able to get this letter from the partners. I hope that's answered your question. Thank you. No other questions. Please don't hesitate. If there aren't too many questions in the coming minutes, we will close our session. But anyway, we will publish the answers to the questions on the website, and you can also consult them again. The session is recorded, so you can also listen to it again. And there are also our email addresses. So you also have spaces where you can ask questions. There is a raised hand. It's an email address. olicana2007@gmail.com. You can speak. Hello, yes. Yes, please go ahead. Thank you very much. I am Olivier from DRC, Guardian V. I'd like to ask a question because we have a project to implement with the European Union, which is in the logic of the community. So in the project approach, can we add this as a different additional project with one part covered by the previous project? Thank you for your question. Yes, absolutely. The initiative finance can work with co-finance for something already submitted by other projects. But on the other hand, please note that we ask that you finance at least 50% of the project. So check that you are not asking to finance some of what is financed by the European Union. But yes, absolutely. Where you can justify what you need for this additional finance, that you justify that tell that such and such results have already been achieved from the finance from the European Union or from other partners. Thank you very much. Ange Mavula wishes to take the floor as well. Go ahead. You can turn on your mic and ask your question. Okay. It's just for to clarify, I'd like to check that it can be an old file for Appendix 2, the administrative form. You just need to enter it per year. We started in 21, 22, 23, and the forecasts for 22, 24. I think the 22, 20, 22, 23, 24, and the forecast for 2024, unless I am wrong. No, we're talking about 2024. But yes, if you have 2025, please do not hesitate to put those. But if you have not a year where you've closed your expenditure, so you haven't got all of your expenditure for 2024, but if you have the planned expenditure for 2025, please do not hesitate to put those. Thank you very much. There's a question too in English in the chat saying if the applicant needs clarifications while preparing this expressions of interest, will you be able to provide guidance? No, yes, there's no problem. I repeat, we will give you the slides with our email addresses and do not hesitate to copy us all in so we can answer quickly. Obviously, clearly, over Christmas, we will be slightly less responsive, but you will get an answer at the start of January. And if you have questions already, please don't hesitate to ask them, and we will answer them by the end of the week. No questions in the chat or in the Q&A. If something comes to mind, please do not hesitate. Yes. Ernest. Cathy Abois. Go ahead. Yes, I am. Ernest Cathy Abois from Burundi. From Burundi. In the call, you talk About the documents to submit, you speak of the last validated audit report. So when you're talking about validating, you're talking about validation how? Validated by whom? Thank you very much for your question. So the validated reports, everything depends on your country and how things work. Either it is validated by the auditors themselves and signed by people in the audit company, or by a body that validates the accounts, or either the stakeholder or your management. It really depends on the country. So it's not possible to answer you. But in any case, if you have a final audit report, send it and we will take it into account. If there are no more questions, we will close and we can be in touch by email if necessary later. Jolly good. So thank you very much to you all for being with us. Thank you for your interest in this call for expressions of interest. Good luck with the last moments writing your concept note and the appendix. And we wish you good end of the year, and we look forward to reading your projects in January. And thank you to our interpreter, Paul, this morning. We cannot hear you, but thank you very much, and thank you, Paul.